let me remind you that the title of this class is An Introduction to Greek Grammar. Now you may be getting into this and go like, wow, this is overwhelming. Understand, there are crazy people who spend their entire lives studying Greek grammar. It's that beautiful and that complicated. Just like there are people who spend their entire lives studying trees or bugs or flowers or whatever. When you get into the details, yeah, it's an ocean, it's a universe. We're not trying to become experts here. What we're trying to do is learn enough so that we can swim through the ocean, so that we can understand the basics. So, don't feel bad if you look every now and then and go like, wow, that's overwhelming. Yeah, I mean, it's a language. There's a lot to it. But we don't need to understand all the details to swim, right, in this ocean, okay? We don't need to understand every starfish and every chemical reaction that takes place. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to simply understand the basics of Greek grammar so that we can make our way through a Greek text and understand what's being said here. All right, so we're talking about verbs, all right, okay? And we've seen that verbs change form. They morph to show us tense, voice, mood, person, and number. And we've seen that the personal endings tell us 3 out of 5 of those things. They tell us the person and number, and they also tell us the voice. So, wow, just with the personal endings, we get a lot of information. But how do we know the mood, and how do we know the tense? Well, we'll set mood aside for a little while here because we'll see, for one thing, most of the verbs in any Greek text are in the indicative mood. So we'll just focus on the indicative mood for now. And also we'll see when we get to mood that it really isn't that difficult to recognize the other moods. So let's just set that to the side and let's ask the question, how does a Greek verb show us its tense? English verbs, like Greek verbs, change forms to show you their tense. So I might say jump, and I might say jumped. ED on the end, right? Jump is like I jump, right? And I might say just a second ago, I jumped. Or if I want to make it continuous, I might say just a few seconds ago, I was jumping, right? And we've seen with English that English verbs, and English everything for that matter, tends to be very random and not very regular at all. So we expect that from English. And by now, we're beginning to expect that Greek is much more elegant, much less barbaric in the way that it expresses things. So what we will see is that Greek has 5 tenses, and it has very regular ways to show us those 5 tenses. Now, 5 tenses is a lot of tenses, and it's a lot of words. This chart, are you getting sick of seeing this chart? I'm just trying to give you a little taste of what it was like when I was a student and they gave me this chart. You can see I have issues with this chart, but this chart was just like, man, they gave me all these forms of these verbs and I had no idea what to make of this. And I am convinced that you really don't need these kinds of charts. What you need instead is the ability to see certain patterns. And so what we want to do in this class is look at the very regular patterns by which Greek will say, hey, I'm present tense, or some other clues to say, hey, I'm imperfect, or I'm perfect, or maybe I'm aorist, or I'm perfect. So the 5 tenses will all show you themselves by certain very regular patterns, and it all comes to this beautiful picture in the middle of your master chart, the roots and stems. So let me explain. So look at this glorious pages 4 and 5 on your master chart, and here it is. This is all the patterns. Once you understand this chart, you will understand Greek verbs, believe it or not. Maybe not in every detail, but plenty well to read a Greek text and understand what's being said. So isn't this awesome? Isn't this awesome? Okay, well, we start off by saying, okay, we're looking at the regular roots and stems right now, and only the boxes that are not shaded, in other words, the white boxes, are regular. All the shaded ones are irregular in some way or another, so we're only looking at the white ones. So here is this beautiful regular verb, luo. And you can see the root of luo is just lu. And so it becomes luo and luso and elusa and all these different forms to show you its tense. And we'll look at that, so don't worry. But first, just look at the 5 tenses. We have the present tense, imperfect tense, future tense, aorist tense, and the perfect tense. Now we have some forms here, aorist passive, future passive. A little confusing, but we'll look at that, don't worry, and get that sorted out. So let's talk first about how we make a present tense verb from luo. Now I want you to notice that right below the name of the tense here is the formula for how to make that tense. And so for the present tense, we use the present tense stem and the primary endings. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, what's the present tense stem? Well, the present tense stem is the one you learned when you learned the word because the lexical form is always the present tense. So when we learned the word luo, we learned it as luo. Okay, so that's the present tense. One way to think of the present tense is it's the tense where nothing's messed up, right? It's just perfect. We have o, ase, amen, eta, usi right on the end here. No foul ups, no strange changes. It's just exactly as we would expect it to be. So take a look here then at the present tense stem tacking on the primary endings. Now primary makes sense, right? Because it's present tense. We would expect that to be present time. So it becomes luo, luace, lua, luamen, lueta, luusi. O, ace, a, amen, eta, usi. And just to check, if I said luamen, what would I be saying? Well, first person plural, right? Amen, I would be saying we loose. If I said luace, what would I be saying? Well, second person singular, you loose. Now the middle passive, we just tack on the middle passive endings. Amai, e, etai, amatha, estha, antai, remember? So, luamai, lue, luatai, luamatha, luestha, luantai. Okay, so if I said luamai, what would I be saying? I am loosed, right? If I said luestha, what would I be saying? Y'all are loosed. So it's passive here. Again, the middle, we usually won't use that translation. We'll just stick with the passive. But okay, do you see how the present tense is made? We just take our dictionary form here and we tack on the primary endings. Piece of cake. So let's look at the imperfect. Remember, the imperfect is ongoing action in the past time. Okay, well, how do we make one? Well, here's the recipe. We augment, we use a present tense stem, and the secondary endings. Okay, well, what does all that mean? Well, the augment, remember, is the epsilon that we add to the front of the word that tells us we're going into past time. The present tense stem is what we just looked at. So, lu. So you can see lu, unmessed up here, just nice and clear, just lu. So the imperfect will look a lot like the dictionary form with this augment, okay? And then we use, no surprise here, the secondary endings down here because the secondary endings indicate past time. Let's look a little closer at how those endings are put on, and you can see that we just take our secondary endings on this augmented present tense stem. So for example, eluon, right here, right, means I was loosing. Elus means you were loosing. Eluin means he, she, or it was loosing. Eluamen means we were loosing. Elueta means y'all were loosing. And eluon means they were loosing. Now you might notice that the first person singular and third person plural are the same here. That's unusual, but in this case, context will have to tell you which you're talking about. Notice then that in the middle passive, and again we'll just focus on the passive, it would be eluamen. Notice we're taking amen. This is the middle passive ending. We're tacking it on, so this would be I was being loosed. Now I want you to notice what a train wreck English is. I was being loosed. You have to use all of that verbiage just to say what Greek says so simply with eluamen. And it kind of freaks us out in English a little bit because it's almost like it's too condensed. I mean, there's just packs too much punch with too little verbiage, but that's Greek for you. It's very, very concise, very clear. Eluamen means I was being loosed. Eluu means you were being loosed. Eluata means he, she, or it was being loosed. Eluamatha means we were being loosed. Eluesta means y'all were being loosed. And eluanta means they were being loosed. So that's the imperfect. Are you getting the hang of this chart? You look at the tense and you see the formula for making that particular tense. So for a future, it's a sigma before the primary endings. I'll bet you could explain this without me even going over it. But just in case, see this nice row of sigmas here? Okay, that means we're future. Sigma before the primary endings. That only makes sense, right? We wouldn't use secondary past time endings for a future tense. The sigma shoves it into the future here. So luso is I will loose. Luces, you will loose. Luce, he, she, or it will loose. Lusamen, we will loose. Luceta, y'all will loose. And lususin, there we go, means they will loose. And it'd be great for you to say these out loud after I do as well and really get these stuck in your head. I know I'm repeating a lot, but that's kind of the key to getting these really jammed into your brain, okay? So let's look at the middle. I will loose for self. Now, I want you to notice something a little weird here. This is a true middle because there is an actual separate form that we'll see in a little bit for the future passive. So this is the future middle. Lusamai, luse, lusatai, lusamatha, lusasta, lusantai. Won't see that very much because, as I've said, the middle is not that common in the New Testament. So don't worry too much about that, but that's how you would make it. Makes sense, doesn't it? And here's the formula for making an aorist tense. Aorist, active, and middle. We'll see it like with the future that the aorist and future both have a different form for the passive. But here's the active. You'll have, remember, first of all, what is aorist in terms of aspect and time? Remember that tense equals aspect plus time, and aspect is the kind of action. So the aorist tense is undefined action in the past time. Okay, well, because it's in the past time, we would expect an augment, which indeed we have. We have that epsilon right there on the front of the verb. We have a sigma alpha, which is our tense formative. That's what tells us, hey, I'm an aorist. And then the secondary endings, which tell us, again, that we're in past time. So let's put it together. So the aorist winds up looking like this. Elusa, elusas, elusin, elusamen, elusate, elusan. Now, no doubt you're screaming, hey, wait a minute, what's this sa, sas, sin, samen, sata, san? That doesn't look like anything over here. Well, what's happening is this alpha is messing up the endings. At least we call it messing them up. It looks different to us. Turn to the next page and you'll see that I went ahead and did a whole chart on this just because I found that students were so upset by this outrage that just to show you that, okay, the secondary endings look like this. On, sn, amen, eta, on. Okay, but in the aorist form, it's sa, sa, sen, samen, sata, san. It's that sigma alpha that's creating that. So, okay, yeah, remember shapes. Okay, here's the shape. Here's the shape under a blanket a little bit, okay? We have to get used to seeing that. Just to make sure we're getting the meaning here, let's just test ourselves a little here. Elusa means I loosed. See, it's past time, undefined aspect. It just says it happened, right? So what would be elusate? Would mean y'all loosed, right? And if I said elusata, I would mean that he, she, or it loosed for him, her, or itself. Okay. Again, the middle, a true middle, is not that common, so we won't spend too much time over on this, but elusamen, eluso, elusata, elusamatha, elusaste, elusanta. Okay, get to where you can say those things like that. But just make sure that when you see elusas, for example, it means you loosed. You see that second person singular. It's you. It's past time. It's undefined. You loosed. All right, let's focus our attention now over on the right-hand side of the tree and look at the perfects and then at these passive forms. Then we've got it. So what about these perfects? Now, how do I know the formula for the perfect? Remember, right underneath the name of the tense is the formula. And the formula for a perfect active is reduplication, a kappa, and a primary active ending. Okay, the formula for the perfect middle passive will be a reduplication, no kappa, no connecting vowel, and a primary middle passive ending. Now let's zoom in and look at that a little closer. But wait a minute, I'm using some language you've never heard before. What is reduplication? Well, for starters, it seems a little redundant to me. Duplication would be good enough, but anyway, we call it reduplication. And I'll bet you could almost guess what a reduplication is by looking at these words. What you do is you take the first letter, you duplicate it, and you separate it with an epsilon. So lu becomes lelu. Okay, so the reduplication will really stick out in the perfect. It's a really nice clue. The other thing that helps you with perfects is the kappa. And you can see there will always be this kappa in the active ka, kas, ken, common, kata, kasin. So reduplication, kappas, and primary active endings. Now these endings may look a little strange to you. Let's look at our chart again that shows the modified forms of the endings and see if we can at least see the shape there. Okay, well, to be honest, it does look quite a bit different. O, ace, a, amen, eta, usi becomes ka, kas, ken, common, kata, kasin. You see the shape there, but it does look a bit different. Now, you'll notice, too, that it's very much like the aorist endings, except instead of sa, sas, sen, samen, sata, san, you have ka, kas, ken, common, kata, kasin. So, get used to this idea that these personal endings, when they're attached to the tense formatives, the things that tell you the tense, they morph around a little bit. But hopefully you could see that, okay, kas, that looks like second singular. Amen looks like amen, even though it's an alpha there, right? And ata looks kind of like eta. It's just that alpha has swallowed up these vowels and made it ka, kas, ken, common, kata, kasin. So repeat these after me just for practice. Leluka. Leluka means I have loosed. Now in English, we try to capture the perfect tense with this idea of have. It's been done, okay? But it really doesn't do a very good job. Remember, the perfect tense is something happens in the past with effects that continue on all the way up to the time of the speaker and really kind of point on beyond that too. So I have loosed is the best we can do in English. But okay, well that's why we're learning Greek, so we don't have to rely on English, right? So leluka, I have loosed. Lelukas, you have loosed. Leluken, he, she, or it has loosed. Lelukamen, we have loosed. Lelukate, y'all have loosed. And lelukasin, they have loosed. Now the perfect middle passive, notice that they share a form, is also pretty easy to spot for a couple of reasons. First of all, we get this nice reduplication, which is always really easy to spot. But also here now, but wait, there's no kappa, but there's also no connecting vowel. Now what does that mean? Now remember, normally we get amai, a, etai, a, metha, esta, antai. There's some sort of connecting vowel there. But with the middle passive, you just have my, sai, tai, metha, sta, ntai. Okay, notice the vowels are gone. And this one changed. Actually, This A went through a lot of changes, and it once was a psi, but hey, that's more information than you need. Just realize when you see my, psi, tai, metha, sta, untai, just tacked right on to the stem like that. Lu mai, la lu psi, la lu tai, la lu metha, la lu sta, la lu tai, rather than amai, a etai, amatha, esta, antai. When you drop that connecting vowel, that's a great sign that you're looking at a perfect middle passive form. Now, as far as meaning goes, okay, it's middle or passive. We'll ignore the middle and talk about the passive here. So it happened to me, and it's like a perfected action. So we're going to translate it, I have been loosed. What a mess, right? English is, which Greek communicates so beautifully with these little verbal utterances here. So, lelumai means I have been loosed. Lelusai, you have been loosed. Lelutai, he, she, or it has been loosed. Lelumitha, we have been loosed. Lelustha, y'all have been loosed. And leluntai, they have been loosed. And finally, we come down to our aorist passive and future passive forms. Now notice we get this whole box just for the passive forms of the aorist and the future. Okay, well, first of all, let's just, what would that mean? Remember, aorist means past time, and passive means it's happening to me, right? So I was loosed. It happened to me. Okay, how do we make an aorist passive? Well, it makes sense that we would have an augment, right? Because it's past time, so we have on the front. Here's your big clue for the aorist passive, and it's really a great one because they stick out. This theta, just kind of a tall letter, and they're easy to see. Theta, eta, theta, eta. So theta, eta will be your tense formative, and then you have these secondary active endings tacked on. Now, I've always thought it's strange that we use secondary active endings on an aorist passive, but you can see that the theta, eta swallows up most of the information anyway, so it's not too confusing. So, eleuthein means I was loosed. Eleuthes means you were loosed. Eleuthe means he, she, or it was loosed. Eleuthemen means we were loosed. Eleutheta means y'all were loosed. And eleutheson means they were loosed. Again, if you want to look at this chart that shows what happens to these endings when they get attached to the tenses, here it is, the aorist passive. So from on, sn, amen, eta, on becomes thein, thes, the, themen, theta, theson. So yeah, it's morphed around quite a bit. But hopefully you could tell person and number by these little clues on the end. And then the theta, eta tells you aorist passive. The future passive form is actually built off of the aorist passive form, which is really strange. It's just how it is, but it's just theta, eta, sigma. So here's our sigma again, which helps us out that when you see the sigma before the personal endings, think future. Now this one makes a little more sense. Passive, theta, eta, kind of has that passive feel to me. And then the sigma tells me future, and it uses the primary middle passive endings. Of course, in this case, it's a true passive because there was a separate form for the future middle. So this means I will be loosed. Lu thesamai. Lu these, you will be loosed. Lu thesetai, he, she, or it will be loosed. Lu thesamatha, we will be loosed. Now, just pause right here. That's a long way from luo, isn't it? Lu thesamatha. But if you recognize thes as the future passive clue and amatha as your first person plural passive ending, thes amatha is actually just two little bits of information. I mean, when we don't know that and we see a word like luthe samatha, we think, how in the world will I ever find the verb in there? Well, because we recognize these things as grammatical clues, right? Luthes amatha. All right, we will be loosed. Luthesestha, y'all will be loosed. And luthesantai, they will be loosed. Okay, I understand you feel like you just got thrown in the ocean. This is a lot of information, but just back up, zoom out here, and let me just remind you what all we're doing, and we have a lot of time to let this information sink in. So this is like overview. It shows you how we make all the various kinds of verbs in Greek. These are the patterns. So underneath each of the tenses is the formula. So take a look at those and just study this chart over and over until it makes sense to you how we're putting these various clues together to tell us the tense of the verbs. Just like a plant that starts in the ground and it has the roots and then it goes up and then it branches into various parts and pieces and it becomes this thing of beauty. The Greek language is like that. Every Greek verb multiplies into all of these forms. It can be pretty overwhelming. Like imagine you were an aphid or some little bug up there in this tree. You could feel pretty lost up there. And I think that's how Greek students often feel when they first start because they don't see the pattern to it all. But as we work our way through, I hope you'll come to see that the way that the Greek verb starts from the roots and goes on up into all these different forms is really quite consistent and quite an amazing thing, not unlike this maple tree here.